Hi there, Lauren Crawford, community builder, the Wisdom Trust, and the founder of that wonderful new enterprise. Have you ever had a conversation that kind of shifted your life? This happened to me a few months ago when speaking with a mentor of mine. He was asking me about my coaching business and how that was coming along, and I shared with him that it was fine. I was doing some good work, impacting people's lives, but at the same time, I really saw it as a stepping stone for something bigger, for building co-living environments for aging gay men. And he said, "That's fabulous. Why aren't you working on that now?" And it kind of took me aback. And I realized, And then with that discussion, what ended up unfolding is this idea of build the community now, build it virtually, build those connections, make these relationships real now, so that as you grow connections and build relationships over the coming months and years, you'll have a strong foundation upon which to build co-living environments. You'll have networked and met so many people and built so many wonderful relationships that it'll be natural. So that's what I did, and that's what I'm doing. For the last 3 months, I've been having conversations with gay men over 50, and these have been profoundly interesting conversations. I'm actually shocked because I never saw myself in this area. It came from that conversation. There was a big download. This is what I do, the big download from up there, from the universe. And everything just felt right in that moment. And since then, the universe has been conspiring to make this super successful. So again, conversations with over 60 men, learning and exploring what they're going through in this stage of life, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities. There's a whole range of experiences, all of which we want to know more about and we want to hear about. One of the things that can be a problem in this stage of life, a challenge, shall we say, is loneliness and self-isolation. So I realized that when we started to hear this idea that loneliness is an epidemic in our society, and I really wondered, well, how is it for gay men? Because as a single gay person myself, I find myself doing less. I was finding myself being less engaged, feeling like sometimes making the effort is more than what the outcome seems in terms of meeting up and having, going to do things with other people. And so it just felt easier to sort of stay in and just do my own thing. And that can lead down a path of loneliness, right? I'm fortunate in that I have this deep inner journey work that I've been doing for almost 30 years. So I have a rich sort of spiritual life that keeps me from this place of equating aloneness with loneliness. So I'm quite comfortable being on my own, but I think for a lot of us, when we're choosing that unconsciously, so it becomes a habit and a pattern, that can lead to a lot of sadness, a lot of withdrawal, a lot of life feeling less joyful. It can actually start feeling a bit heavy and onerous. So one of the things that we're looking at with the Wisdom Trust is, how do we have conversations? How do we build deeper connections when maybe men are not as engaged with their communities? And trust me, this isn't just single men. I'm not just talking about single men. You can be in a relationship and you can also be in your couple withdrawing, or you might even be withdrawing from each other. Right. So this is something that we really need to and want to explore. And we're doing a great job of it within our community. So what I didn't want was to look at this around, the idea of trying to fix something, that somehow we're broken, that the whole thing of pathologizing everything, and that everything requires a therapist or a counselor. I just personally don't agree with that. I have nothing, but respect for counselors, for therapists, psychologists, psychotherapists, and the like. But I also think sometimes we disempower ourselves of our own agency and our own capacity to build and to grow. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, I knew that I had some work to do around my relationships with men. Being a gay man and not being, all of that enamored of men, not the physical and the sexual, but just the gender, sex of man. Um, that landed for me, more clearly in the last few years. And so what I realized I wanted to do, and this was, support of a therapist or whatever, was I was going to coach men. My target for coaching was going to be men in midlife. And in doing that work, I would learn a lot about myself. I would hold that space for those men and make uh, that journey a benefit for both of us. So I was doing some healing work while I was also providing those coaching services, and it was profoundly powerful. And so a lot of that looks like conversations. Yes, there was a dynamic of coach and client, but it was conversations. It was a deepening of my connection with men. And even though I was occupying that coach seat, I was feeling more secure in my capacity to hold that space for another man. That was powerful for me. So when my mentor said, do a podcast, start focusing on gay men, I was like, duh, it just seems so obvious. And then, since then it's moved forward. So I think we all oftentimes, and as a spiritual seeker, I agree with what I'm going to say. Obviously, I wouldn't say it if I didn't agree with it. But I think that we have a lot of the answers within. And sometimes we go seeking outside of ourselves for those answers because maybe we're not as comfortable or clear as we want to be, or self-confident in terms of that inner direction, that inner voice. But we do have it, right? And so that's all I'm saying is, if you have an inkling, if you have an idea that, yeah, I want to make some shifts, some changes at this stage in my life, go for it. And it can start with baby steps. Baby steps are good, because we're not going to go whole hog and change things overnight. You can't go to the gym and start lifting a few barbells or dumbbells and all of a sudden have these bulging biceps and these big pecs. It just doesn't work that way. It's a concerted effort. It's incremental steps. It takes time. And so I'm committed to that. Now that I'm doing this work and finding these connections, things are accelerating at a really beautiful pace. And a lot of guys are coming together. Dozens of guys are coming together. And on top of that, because I've had such beautiful connections, having conversations and recording them vis-a-vis a podcast, even better. Because here's the thing. We learn and we grow through storytelling. That's the history of humans. Pre-writing and text, not this kind of text, but, written documents and published documents. It was about storytelling. Storytelling was how the gurus, shared their wisdom with their students, right? They told stories or small snippets or aphorisms and these kinds of things. And it was through storytelling that we've grown into these highly intellectual humans. We thrive on stories. We thrive on understanding what others are going through. And that also, in this crazy period that we're in right now, can really help us to understand compassion, that how we can be compassionate towards our fellow humans. And as gay men, we've suffered a lot of discrimination. We've been, challenged in every way, shape, or form because of just who we are as those little boys, not knowing, like, why do I feel so different? What's going on here? And that whole covert cultural sexual abuse, as Joe Court lovingly calls it. I love that term. This covert cultural sexual abuse that we all had to experience, that creates a certain armor around us. And so what we need to do is break through that. And many of us have over the years, but many of us still have residuals of all of that stuff, and be able to build deeper connections. So my goal, my hope, my wish is that any of you listening to this, hearing this, seeing this, if you're feeling like there is some element of disconnection going on, that you're feeling like there's probably more to this stage of life than maybe you're plugging into, and You know what? It also doesn't need to look like the stuff from the past. We need to start creating a new playbook for ourselves. What is this going to look like? The things that brought you joy in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and maybe even into your 50s, they don't need to be the same things that bring you joy going into your 60s, 70s, and beyond. We can change. The thing that I think is super exciting is we as gay men are super creative, right? So let's model what aging looks like differently. Let's do it in our own way. Let's learn how to do community better. So this idea of community, I often do the air quotes because I don't know, my lived experience has been like, yeah, I have in common with these guys that I like men, but does that make it a community? I don't know. But maybe at this stage, we can really build community for men over 50 who are seeking a deeper, richer connection with themselves, with their peers, and building this idea of growing into what we might want to call, a gay elder, like someone who is in full command of their realizing their fullest potential. Yeah, because one of the other things that can happen is we can start to just settle, and the settling is part of the isolation and all of that. So changing how we be as elders in this world, in this gay world, is a real big part of what I'm hoping to grow as we move forward. I would love you along for the ride. So you'll be hearing from me daily for the next little while with messages just like this. And when you're ready, say hello. Let's have a conversation. And until then, I bid you a fair day. Take good care.